Hello everyone, it's Mr. Salimata over here, and in today's lesson we'll be looking at solving simultaneous equations using elimination method. And by the end of this lesson, every student should be able to solve simultaneous equations using elimination method. Now, talking about simultaneous equations, what are simultaneous equations? So simultaneous equations are two equations that contain the same variables. What do I mean by that? Let's take a look at this question on our whiteboard right now. Yes, if you look at our first equation and you look at our second equation, you can tell that they contain the same variables, and we're talking about both equations contain the x variable and the y variable, right? So then how do we then solve simultaneous equations? Yes, so we solve simultaneous equations by finding the value of x and y that work in both equations. Yes, so we are finding the value of x and then the value of y that would work in both equations. Okay, now in our case we are talking about what? Elimination method, right? So then what comes to our mind when we hear the term elimination? It simply means canceling out, right? It simply means canceling out. Yeah, so then for us to solve simultaneous equation using elimination method, we have to cancel out either the x or y variable in both equations at the same time. And we can do that by either adding or subtracting. Yeah? Okay, so now, before we get to solve this question on our whiteboard over here, I want to tell you guys about the general rule, yes, that we have to follow whenever we are solving simultaneous equations using elimination method. Yes, and the simultaneous linear equation is in the standard form of ax plus by equal to c. So this is the general rule that we have to follow right here. So this is the standard form of what? Simultaneous linear equations. Yes, and if we look at both of our equations, we can tell that they are in this form. Yes, so this a over here is a constant, the b is a constant, and the c is the constant. What I mean by constant is a, b, c, these are numbers. Yes, and if we look at both of our equations right here, right, you can tell that they're in this form. Yes, so both of them have what? A constant, they have a variable which is x, and then what? They have what? They have another constant, right? And then a variable, the y, right? And a constant over here, which is what? The two numbers, right? So both of these equations are in the standard form of what? Simultaneous linear equation, right? Okay, so now, I'm sure right now we're asking ourselves, say like, why then do we have to cancel the x or y variable at the same time, yes, in both our equations? Well, the reason is because if we cancel out one variable, it leaves us with another variable that we can solve, or rather that we can find, right? Okay, so now let's get into this lesson and work out our first question on our whiteboard. Yes, so the first thing that we have to do is let us label our equations. Yes, okay, so this is our first equation and this is our second equation. Okay, so now let's look at our x variable, yes, and y variable. Which of these two variables do you think would be easier for us to cancel or eliminate? Let's look at our x variable right now, yes, and then let's look at the coefficient. Yes, if you look at our first equation, the coefficient is what? Is 3, right? Of our x variable, right? And then our second equation, the coefficient as well is 3 of our x variable. right? But then if we look at our y variable over here, the coefficient of the y variable in our first equation is 1, positive 1. And then the coefficient in our second equation of our y variable is what? Is negative 4. So then which one do you think would be easier for us to eliminate? It's definitely going to be the x variable, right? Now remember, I did say that we can eliminate by either adding or subtracting, right? So in our first equation, our 3x is positive, right? In our second equation, our 3x is also positive. So then how can we eliminate? We can simply subtract, right? So let us do that, all right? So we are subtracting, yes? So we are subtracting the first equation and the second equation, right? And 3x minus 3x, those two cancel out, right? And what are we going to be left with? We'll be left with y, yes, minus y, okay, that's equal to negative 4, and this one is equal to 6. Now, let us not forget, what are we doing? We're subtracting. Let's not forget our subtraction sign there, okay? Okay, so now, y minus negative 4y, what's that? That's 5y equal to negative 4 minus 6. What's that? That's negative 10. So then what will be our next step? Our next step will be what? We'll be finding the value of y. And how do we do that? We have to isolate it, right? And we're going to use our inverse operation. 5 is multiplied to y. And what's the inverse of multiplication? It's division, right? So what we just have to do is divide 5 to both sides of our equation, right? And 5 into 5 is what? Is 1. 1 multiplied by y, that's just y, right? 5 into negative 10, what's that? That's negative 2. So there we go. We have found our y value, okay? So now our next step here will be finding our x value. And how do we find that value? So to find the x value, all what you have to do is you just have to substitute your y value in any of the two equations, okay? So for me, I'll go with equation number 1, all right? So I'm using equation number 1, or rather the first equation, to substitute the y value so I can find my x value, okay? So what's our equation 1? Our equation 1 is 3x plus y equal to negative 4, okay? Okay, so now let us substitute our y value, okay? So we have what? 3x plus, let's open our brackets. What's our y value? Our y value is negative 2. Yeah, let's close our brackets. Equal to negative 4. Yes? Okay. Positive multiplied by negative. What's that? That's negative, right? So the equation then will be 3x minus 2 equal to negative 4. Yes? So we have like terms here. Negative 2 and negative 4. Right? So let us what? Isolate 3x by simply adding 2 to both sides of our equation. Negative 2 and positive 2, those cancel out. Yes? We shall remain with 3x on our left side of our equation. Negative 4 plus 2, that's negative 2. Right? What's our next step? We have to find the value of x. And how do we do that? We isolate our x by simply dividing both sides of our equation by 3. 3 into 3 is 1. Yes, 1 multiplied by x. That's x equal to negative 2 over 3. So there we go. We have found our x value, right? Now we have found both our y and x value. All right, so now let's do the checking. Yes, let us try to see if our y value and our x value would work in both of our equations. All right, okay, so let's do that. Let's start with equation 1. All right, now we are checking. Yes, let me just write it here. Yes, we are checking. Okay, and we start with equation 1. our equation 1 is what? Is 3. Yes, is 3x plus y equal to -4, right? Okay, so we have our 3 there. We substitute our x value. What's our x value? -2/3, right? -2/3, yes, plus, what's our y value? Our y value is -2, right? Equal to -4. So let me just use my red marker, -2. All right? Okay. What will be our next step? Let us simplify this term right here. Yes? Let us multiply 3 to -2/3. What's that? So these two will cancel out, right? And we shall remain with what? With -2 plus positive multiplied by negative. What's that? That's negative, right? So our sign will just change here, okay? To what? To -2 equal to -4. -2 minus 2 is what? Is what? Is -4, right? Equal to -4. So you see, our y and x value work in our first equation, right? Now, let us do the same with our second equation. What's our second equation? Equation number 2. 3x minus 4y equal to 6. And what are we doing? We just substitute our x and y value in this equation, right? So that will be what? 3. What's the value of x that we just found? -2/3, right? We close our brackets, yes, minus, we have our 4 there. What's our value of y? -2. Yeah? Equal to 6. Let us simplify. 3 multiplied to -2/3, those two cancel out. We shall be left with what? With -2, yes, minus. Now here's the thing, okay? Here is the thing. We have a negative sign here, right? So it will be -4 multiply, yes, -4 multiply by what? -2. What's that? That's +8, right? So this sign over here will change to positive, equal to 6. All right? Let's deal with these two terms on our left side of the equation. -2 plus 8. What's that? That's +6, equal to 6. There we go. Our x and y values, they work in both of our equations. Yes? Okay, so now let us take a look at our second question over here. Yes? And what's the first thing that we can notice in both of our equations? Yes? We can notice that these two equations are in the standard form, right? We can notice that these two equations are in the standard form. Yes? So the first thing that we have to do is we have to label them, right? So let's do that. So this is our equation 1 and this is our equation 2, okay? And now, what will be our next step? Our next step is for us to see which variable we can cancel or eliminate in both of our equations at the same time. And remember, we can do that by either what? Adding or subtracting, right? Okay, let's check with our x variable. If you look at our both equations and you look at the coefficient of x, yes, both of our equations, they're not the same, right? Our first equation has 7 and our second equation has 3, right? So we definitely can't eliminate the x variable, right? Okay, let's check with the y variable. Yes, let us look at the coefficient of y in both of our equations. Yes, they both have the same coefficient, right? Which is what? Positive 2. So what does that tell us? That tells us that we can easily eliminate what? The y variable, right? Okay, now in our equation 1, it's positive 2, and in our equation 2, it's also what? Positive 2y, right? Equation 1, positive 2y, equation 2, positive 2y. So then, how are we going to eliminate? We have to subtract, right? So let us do that. All right, so what are we doing? We are subtracting equation 1 and equation 2, okay? And 2y minus 2y, what's that? Those two cancel out, right? And we shall be left with what? 7x, yes, equal to 23. 3x equal to 11. Now remember, what are we doing? We're subtracting, all right? So let's not forget our sign, okay? 7x minus 3x, that's what? That's 4x equal to 23 minus 11. What's that? That's 12. Okay, so what will be our next step? Our next step will be what? Finding the value of x. And how do we do that? We have to isolate it, right? And we're going to use our inverse operation. We just divide both sides by 4, right? 4 into 4 is 1. 1 multiplied by x is x equal to 4 into 12 is what? Is 3, right? So there we go. We have found our x value, all right? So now, what will be our next step? Our next step will be finding the y value. And how do we do that? We just simply substitute our x value in any of our two equations over there, right? In our first question, I used equation number 1 to substitute, yes, my y value. So in this question, I'll use my equation 2, all right? Okay, so let's do that. So I'm using my equation 2, yeah? And what's equation 2? It's 3x plus 2y equal to 11, right? Okay, so now, what am I substituting? What's my x value? My x value is 3, right? So that will be 3 open brackets. Yes, substituting my x value, 3, close brackets, plus 2y equal to 11. Okay, now let us simplify this part right here. Yes, so we can just multiply. Yes, 3 by 3, that's 9, plus 2y equal to 11. Yes, okay, so now what will be our next step? Our next step will be grouping our like terms together, right? So we have a 9 here, which is a constant, and then we also have 11 there, which is also a constant, right? So what can we do? We just subtract 9 to both sides of our equation, right? Positive 9 and negative 9, those two cancel out. Yes, we shall be left with what? With 2y equal to, yes, 11 minus 9. What's that? That's 2. Okay? Now, what will be our next step? Our next step will be what? Finding the value of y. And we'll do that by what? By isolating our y. So we simply divide both sides by 2. 2 into 2 is what? Is 1. 1 multiplied by y is y equal to 2 into 2 is what? Is 1. So there we go. We have found our y value. Now, let us try to check. Yes, let's check if our x and y values would work in both of our equations. All right, so let's check with our first equation. So what are we doing now? We are checking. Yes, let's start with equation number 1, our first equation. And our first equation is what? 7x, yes, plus 2y equal to 23. All right. Okay, so let us substitute. So we have our 7 there. And what's our value of x? 3. Right? We close our brackets. Plus 2. What's our value of y? 1. Yeah? We close our brackets. Equal to 23. All right? Let's simplify. We are simply multiplying, right? 7 multiplied by 3 is what? 21. Plus 2 multiplied by 1. That's what? That's 2. Equal to 23. All right? Let's simplify our left side of our equation. 21 plus 2. That's 23. Equal to 23. Right? So our x and y values work in both of our equations. Sorry, in our first equation, right? Okay, so now let's check in our second equation. What's our second equation? We're now checking the second equation, equation number 2. And that's what? That's 3x plus 2y equal to 11. All right, let's substitute. 3, yes. What's our x value? 3. Right? Plus 2. What's our y value? 1. Yes? Equal to 11. All right, so let us simplify. We're just what? Multiplying. 3 by 3, what's that? That's 9. Plus 2 multiplied by 1, that's 2. Equal to 11. Let us simplify our left side of our equation. Right? 9 plus 2, what's that? That's 11. Equal to 11. So there we go. Our x and y values, they work in what? In both of our equations. All right? Okay, so now let's take a look at our third and last question. Yes? Okay, so now, if you look at this question over here, what's the first thing that we have to do? We have to check if it is in what? In the standard form, right? If both of our equations are in the standard form. Yes? So let us take a look at our first equation. Our first equation is definitely in the standard form, right? But our second equation is not in the standard form. Yes? So then, what are we supposed to do? Now remember, both of the equations have to be in this standard form, right? So let us now try to rearrange our second equation so it can be in this form right here, right? Okay, so now let us do that. So we have our 2x over here, right? So all what we have to do is move this 2x to the other side of the equation, all right? And how can we do that? We just have to subtract both sides by what? By 2x, right? So those two cancel out. And what are we going to have? We shall have what? We shall have negative 2x, yes, plus 3y equal to negative 19. Yes? And if you look at this equation right here, it's in this form, right? So now let us write our two equations down. Yes? So we have 4x plus y equal to 10 and negative 2x plus 3y equal to negative 19. All right? Okay, so now let's label them. Equation 1, equation 2. Okay? Okay, so now let's now see if we can eliminate, if we can cancel out the x or the y variable, right? If we look at our two equations, let's look at our x variable over here, and let's look at their coefficients in both of our equations. They don't have the same coefficient, right? And also if we check the y variable in both of our equations, they also don't have the same coefficient. So then, how do we work out such kind of a question? So to work out such kind of a question is you have to find a number that you can multiply to either the first equation or the second equation, so you can match the coefficient of the x or y variable, right? Because that now makes it easier for us to eliminate. Yeah, so in my case, I will take equation number 2, all right, and I'll just multiply this whole equation by -2. So I'm multiplying -2 to this whole equation, our second equation, all right? So let's do that. -2 multiplied by -2x. What does that give us? 4x. -2 multiplied by +3y. That's -6y. Equal to -2 multiplied by -19. That's what? That's +38. Okay? Yeah? Okay, so now let us write our equations now. Okay, so we have equation number 1 and equation number 2. All right, our equation 1 is what? 4x plus y equal to 10, and our second equation will be this equation right here, 4x minus 6y equal to 38. Okay, yeah? So then, have you guys noticed something? We can now eliminate, right? The x value in both of our equations. If you look at the coefficient, it's what? It's 4 in both of our equations, right? And it's positive 4, so all what we just have to do is what? Subtract. So we're subtracting equation 1 and equation 2, right? And positive 4x minus 4x. What's that? Those cancel out, right? And what are we going to remain with? Allow me to write this right here. Okay? We shall remain with what? Y equal to 10, right? We have our -6, right? -6y equal to 38. I'll put this in my brackets. Remember, what are we doing? We're subtracting. Let's not forget our sign there. Okay? Y minus -6y. What's that? That's 7y equal to 10 minus 38. What's that? -28. What will be our next step? Our next step will be what? Finding the value of y. So we just have to isolate it, right? By simply dividing 7 both sides of our equation. 7 into 7 is 1. 1 multiplied by y is y equal to 7 into -28 is what? -4. So there we go. We have found our y value. What will be our next step? Our next step will be finding our x value. And how do we do that? We simply substitute our y value in any of these two equations, right? Let's go with this equation right here. Okay, this one right here. Yeah, so we're going with 4x plus y equal to 10. Yes, so we have 4x plus, let's open our brackets. What's our value of y? Negative 4, right? Close our brackets, equal to 10. Positive multiply to negative 4 is what? It's simply negative 4. So our equation will be x minus 4 equal to 10. Yeah, we have these two constants over here, so let's move this 4 over here to the other side of the equation. Yes, it's negative. If we take the inverse, we just add both sides by 4. Negative 4 and positive 4, those cancel out. We shall remain with 4x equal to, yes, 10 plus 4 is what? Is 14. What's our next step? We find the value of x. We just have to isolate it by simply dividing both sides by 4. Those two cancel out. We shall have what? X equal to, yes, 14 over 4, right? But then we can simplify this fraction. Yeah? We can simplify this fraction over here, right? So therefore, let's simplify it. It will be x equal to 2 into 14 is 7, and 2 into 4 is 2. So there we go, we have found our what? X value. Now, let's check and see if our y and y value work in what? In our equations over there. All right? So let's go with this equation here. Yes? 4x plus y equal to 10. All right? Okay, so we're substituting now. What's our x value? 7 over 2, right? And what's our y value? Negative 4, right? Equal to 10. Let us simplify this term. Yes? 2 into 2 is 1, 2 into 4 is 2. Yes? 2 multiplied by 7 is what? 14. So we have positive multiplied by negative 4. That will simply be what? Be negative 4 equal to 10. Right? 14 minus 4 is 10 equal to 10. So there we go. Our x, yes, our x and y value, they work in our first equation, right? So now, let us now check in this equation right here, right? Which is 3y equal to 2x minus 19, all right? Let us substitute. What's our value of y? Our value of y is what? Negative 4. Equal to, what's our value of x? 7 over 2. Minus 19, right? Let us simplify. 3 multiplied by negative 4 is what? Negative 12 equal to, yes? If we multiply 2, yes, 2 by 7 over 2 is what? Those two cancel out, so we shall just be left with what? With 7 minus 19, yes? So we have negative 12 over here. Let us simplify this part. 7 minus 19, what's that? That's negative 12, right? So there we go. We can see that our y and x value work in what? In both of our equations. Yes? All right. Thank you so much. I'll see you in my next lesson.